One of the greatest challenges we face in marketing is simplifying complex ideas. And the challenge, of course, is that our world keeps getting more complex. The technology gets more complex. The people, the customers, the clients we work with continue to become more complex. So what does it take to really get your eye in to know what is the most important thing my brand and my story should tell? Hello, Mark Jones here. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the CMO Show, brought to you by Impact Institute in partnership with Adobe. Now, my guest today is really special, all the way from the States, Bridget Esposito. She is Vice President and Head of Creative and Brand at Prudential. This, of course, is a really large multinational financial services company. And one of the interesting things about speaking to her in her role is this idea of complexity and simplicity. When you're building out a big team trying to solve really difficult problems and staying relevant as a global brand, it can get a little overwhelming. And so somebody like Bridget has enormous wisdom to share from doing the work. So in our interview today, we're going to talk about teams. How do you bring people along the journey? How do you engage senior stakeholders? How do you get the right tech into the picture? And also a little bit of a secret sauce perspective here. We touch on the role of thinking about yourself as a conductor of an orchestra. Great to have you on the program. Tell me about Prudential, 150 years old. How do you keep an old brand relevant?
Yes, 150 years old and counting. And I love that because we're really working on how to keep people living a better life longer. And that requires reinventing yourself on the regular so that you stay relevant with your audience and that you stay active and you make sure that you're always putting their best interests first. So we've had to constantly look at, what does that mean? Who is our audience? What do they need from us? And look at it from a technical side and say, are we giving them what we need from an ease of use? Are we giving them what they need from a personalization aspect? And are we giving them what they need from a human connection? So it's been a lot of work, but it's very exciting.
One of the things that fascinates me about big global brands like yours, particularly in financial service, is the crossover between B2B and B2C. Yes. So it's sort of starting with this big picture stuff. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you manage that dynamic.
We really work on making sure that we've keyed into what is so important to people. What are the insights? What do they need from us? And we have to look at it from a technical perspective to say, how are we making things look right from an orchestration perspective? So is the user having the same experience with one brand where they might be on an employer side and they might have our benefits in that space from a B2B perspective, all the way to the D2C where they might be looking at our products from an annuity or an investment aspect. It has to be the same thing across the board. They have to feel like they're accessing one Prudential all the way through. So that is one of the bigger challenges. But luckily, the way that we've set up our organization and being able to work so tightly together, and then obviously the tech really becomes a big part of like how we orchestrate such a big affair. Mm.
I think that's really important because, again, one of the biggest challenges with big brands like this is just that sheer complexity.
Yes.
So part of the solution, of course, is marketing automation, one of the reasons for chatting with you.
Yes.
How do you make really complex things simple, just from an overall management point of view?
So first off, you've got to get the buy-in on it. So once you pick the platform that you're saying, I want to be a part of this. And for us personally, we wanted to make sure that we had a platform that was going to be seamless, meaning everything can plug into it and it's one space for all. And that's a big undertaking for most companies. And it's scary for most companies because they think, wow, that's a lot of information that I've got to get right, my CDP and then all the different aspects of it. It's a lot, but it's worth it when you invest and you create that foundation. And then I think from there, we kind of worked through and said, what are the key points of being able to bring people along? So how do we show them what that vision is going to look like and get the buy-in? Because it is a very scary task. It's a daunting task. And so some people say, yeah, no, it's fine. We're doing it just great the way we're doing it. So we had to kind of find small wins along the way. What are small things that we could take on where we could show that just by taking that automation level and taking it off the plate of some of our people that are working, we're creating a faster, more efficient program.
One of the challenges, I imagine, is this giant machine that you've really built, or building, right? So you mentioned bringing people along the journey. I imagine your peers and senior leaders in the organisation What's the vision? How do you get them to buy into something? Because we're talking about a very heavy, sustained lift in terms of investment in tech, people, processes. So what's the vision?
So the vision is that we either buy in and get on board, or we're going to be left behind.
Okay.
And I think with the thought of being left behind for your customers is a really scary thing. And I think when you show the benefit of, if we do this right, not only do we get it right for our users and our customers when they have a better experience, but we also have a better experience for the people working at Prudential. And that's also just as important, right? Taking care of the inside and the outside. And so that vision really helps people understand why we want to buy into it. And when you tie it into your business goals and you're saying, we're going to, help people live a better life longer in that space, but also your employees are going to have the work taken off their plate on a lower funnel so they can really think more higher level and more complex in that space. It starts to become a win for everyone, and people jump on board very quickly.
At a practical level, we're talking about the broader financial services space. There's insurances, there's a whole raft of products. I don't want to get too gloomy, but what would a bad experience look like? What's the motivator? What's the thing you're trying to avoid? Because it's very complicated. It's hotly competitive. The business itself is, susceptible to all of the same big market shifts and interest rates and all sorts of stuff that push you around.
Yeah.
So what are you looking to avoid? What does the bad experience look like?
The bad experience is complexity and confusion, right? And for someone to not understand who we are and find things easy, right? And go on to our Prudential.com and not know what to turn to. That's what bad looks like, right? Not understanding truly or being able to understand what products they need to help them succeed. That is what bad experience looks like for us, right? So I think being able to create this ecosystem where we're personalizing items, where people are starting to see what is really meant for them and what their path and journey could be like for success, that's where we want to go, right? So the opposite of that is what bad would look like. And I think that becomes a key part of success for us in the long run. It's just someone being able to log on to Prudential.com or file a claim or figure out and talk to one of our amazing advisors and things, and just be able to see their journey and their life path and really understand that they have a lot to protect, and it's more than just their money, right? It's about protecting their life's work. I think that's the vision that we really want to get to, and that's what success looks like.
One of the ways I love to talk about that is friction, right? People haven't got time, they've got no attention, they have a very low tolerance for complexity, and they just want straight away, right? That's the world that we live in. You have a background, interestingly, in creative and tech and all sorts of interesting things, right? So what have you brought from those other spaces into humanizing this world?
Storytelling and simplicity.
I love that you've got two things straight off the bat.
Yeah, without a doubt. When I look at the financial world, and I have to tell you, so when I first entered into work at Prudential, I've always been a creative who loves strategy. I love strategy. I love being able to dive in and understand who someone is, what they want, what they need, and kind of crack open the insights of what drives them to do what they do. And when we came into Prudential, I remember sitting down and reading my first creative brief and saying, oh, someone who doesn't understand this, lives paycheck to paycheck, kind of takes the money and doesn't invest it, takes the money out of retirement. I'm like, I am hitting all these boxes. I am the target audience here. And early in your 20s, when you're like, these are a lot of things I didn't know. And I think for me, I was like, number one, we need to simplify the language so people understand it truly, from no matter where you sit in life, right? And no matter where you are in your journey, being able to understand it. But then the storytelling aspect, that's where the power comes from. So even when we look at all of our tools from a tech perspective, and we start talking about personalization, and we start looking at how to really drive and bring the viewer through, storytelling is still at the heart of all of those things. And that's what becomes most important. Because at the end of the day, people do want things simple, they do want to be quick, but they also need to know why they're doing what they do.
You've mentioned this better life narrative at the beginning.
Yes.
How do you take that big picture idea of well-being and then customize that for the different audiences in the context of story? Because we probably have a similar idea of what storytelling looks like through a corporate lens, but there's a million ways of doing this. So how do you connect those dots?
I love that question. So when I look at connecting and pulling it through, one of the newer campaigns we've been working on is protecting your life's work. And that kind of becomes this foundation for us to talk about you're more than the sum of your life's work. It's about more than your money. It's about everything you're doing, whether it's your career, whether it's your family, whether it's, something that you're really passionate about. Like, that is why you invest in these products, to make sure that you're protecting all of that together, that you're leaving that legacy and that you have that space. And I love that storyline, because that allows us to think about everybody's journey is different. Everybody else has something different to protect, right? What I'm protecting in my life is different than what you are. And I think when you start to have that, it becomes a really good basis to tell everybody's story, where they can see themselves in that area. And so we've had a lot of fun with it and created multiple different campaigns. But one of the more recent things that we've worked on that I love is called Flash Forward. And so it's this multi-sensory AI tool that we created, where you're taking your photo, you're answering some questions generated by AI that all kind of are built off of a custom model. And then it's actually outputting what your story is, and then applying it to your photograph. So your photograph gets aged. You get aged into 70.
No, thanks.
Actually, I got to tell you, they look pretty good for aging in that space.
All right.
But
There's
it
a bit
also
of touch-up involved.
Yes, a little bit of touch-up involved.
Yeah.
But it puts you in the environment of these questions that you ask, which aren't your typical questions, and it derives a story. And the stories are wildly accurate, right? We're allowing AI to kind of do what it does best, a little bit of hallucination.
Yeah.
But it creates a storyline based on some interests that you have, that you go, wow, I didn't expect that I would do that. And it's become this kind of fun storytelling space where people are seeing, well, I have a lot to protect. And then also, like, here's what could be next for me in ways that we're unexpecting.
So there's got to be a call to action.
Yes, of course.
Hidden in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work?
So what we're doing is making sure that we're connecting them to the right product, right?
Yeah.
So there's different keywords, there's different things that come through that allow us to put people into different funnels and connect them in the right way to make sure that, okay, we're putting them in the life insurance space, that they're going to need this, along with talking to a Prudential advisor or, investments in things in that space. So it's been a really fun way to pull this through.
Yeah.
All the way from what it looks like from a storytelling perspective, all the way down to an actually direct take action, call to action space.
Culture. How do you deal with that? The nuances of culture. And I mean, I guess this plays into AI. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I ask is I've just kind of got this question about, well, this sophisticated way of engaging with customers, if I'm not mistaken, used to be a human job, right? So the insurance broker would come in and talk to you about your future and all that sort of stuff. How does all of that work? Like, are we effectively replacing the AI? I've got no, interest in agents, by the way. Either way, just kind of curious. Are you sort of recreating a human experience?
So the human still lives.
Yeah.
This human will go on, and I will say that very much so. Even through all the things that we're doing, even the experience I was just telling you about Flash Forward.
Yeah.
We actually have a human that's moderating in the background.
Oh, nice.
Still very important. And our moderation rates have gone down from where it used to be 85%, and now it's about to 20% of that moderation that needs to happen, because there is still so much in AI that is not ready, right? It's a matter of, there's just some things from an empathetic lens or even a diversity lens it's just not there for yet, and so we still have that moderation aspect. We still, within Prudential, our Prudential advisors are real people doing their thing and still being a part of that. And I think when you look at what's next with agentic AI, and seeing some of those agents come to play, I think there's spaces for those and places, and they work in different, very quick answers, like, very kind of lower funnel. Where do I find this? How do I do this?
Yeah.
That I think works really well. But when it comes down to, I want to really understand what my future is about, people still want that human-to-human connection. And for those that don't want that, we still have solutions for that. But the person part of it is still a very big part of how people want to interact.
How would you describe your role in sort of practical terms? How do you see yourself in all of that?
So if you were saying, how do I see myself in, is more of an orchestrator, right?
I wondered if that was actually the word.
Orchestrator is the word. I know, and I think
Adobe's very happy that you use that word.
I know, because they have, what is it, global orchestration?
Yeah.
Is that what they call it?
Global? It's an AI thing.
Yes, an AI thing. And I think when you look at, listen, I'm going to talk specifically about creatives, because when we look at AI, one of the biggest fears in the beginning for creatives was it's going to take my job. Our roles are going to change in that space. And so I think once the creatives saw, it's going to take that lower funnel work off for me, and I can still create my big ideas, but now I can create faster that is what the key was for success for a lot of people. And so, yeah, when you're looking at like, what is this for us? It's like we are now kind of the curators of what these experiences look like.
How do you learn to do that job?
Well, I think just like anything, you have to reskill yourself and you have to rethink your thought process on things. And I think if you take a step back, and it's just more of like looking at it from a larger picture. This is going to happen whether we like it or not. Let's look at what it can really do for us and the benefits of what it can do for us and how our job can get tremendously better by using it. We can automate faster. I know there's 385-ish people within marketing and brand at Prudential, and all of them are using AI at this point.
Okay.
We are 70% faster to first draft than we ever were, right? When I look at that and I say, great, this thing can do the stuff that was kind of low-hanging fruit, making iterations faster, while I still look at the global picture and think of the really big idea and then have it broken out in 7 different ways for myself, or be able to create some imagery that gets me faster to a storyboard. Like, all of those things are exciting. And I think once you start showing people that possibility and say, but now you need to be the moderator of that. So here's my idea, let's filter it through. But now we need to edit that. Is the storyline still strong? And I think once people can kind of drop their ego and their fear, that's when they really start flying with AI.
This metaphor may or may not resonate, but it feels more like you're a conductor of an orchestra.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you thought about it in those terms at all?
Well, no, I haven't, but I do remember it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
yeah.
I got it.
And I'm not a massive buff of classical, but you also have lead violinist or first violinist and so on through the entire orchestra. So you've actually got team heads, as it were. So the reason I sort of bring that up in this story here is that I think one of the things that gets lost in the AI conversation is the art and skill of tying humans together with systems, processes, creative thinking, story.
Yes.
And then a kind of a global view on why we're doing all of this. You've got the unique perspective at a large organisation where this is operating at scale. So I wonder, what's the biggest headache you've got as a conductor, if I can borrow the phrase?
No, I love the way that you're thinking about this. And I would say to make sure that everybody's on the same score. Is that okay? All right.
Yeah, well done.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
That everybody's on the same score, because I think a lot of times, because as you mentioned it, there's different groups doing different things. Sometimes the immediate goal isn't aligned.
Yeah.
And that becomes very hairy, right? So it's making sure that people understand, like, here's the first goal is this, and we're all going up, laddering up to that same thing. And then also everyone is understanding what the limits are as far as what we'll do and what we won't do with AI. So I think setting the ground rules and the foundation of, here's what we're expecting out of it. Here's what we will do. Here's what we won't do. And then here's, from like a brand perspective, what's okay and not okay. I think once you set that too, it helps people all start to get on the same beat and the same tune. I think that becomes really important and is often missed, especially when you have so many different people in different groups, because it is an orchestra. And when one of them is off, the rest of them will feel it wholeheartedly. So it becomes that, and the relationship part of it is so important.
I'm going to push it just a little bit further on this metaphor because I'm enjoying it. Let's just say that you're conducting the New York Philharmonic.
Oh, wow, I've got
right?
big. Look at me.
But also people could go to your experience, or they could go and listen to the London Philharmonic, right?
Yes.
Competition. So how do you make sure that this system that you're building is not just good for us, it's actually competitive, competitively useful?
Yes.
This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges in all the markets that you serve, is that ultimately it's very transactional, it's very low margin, high volume. So there's got to be, at some point, an experience level that makes people want to do or to go to your concert, so to speak.
Yeah, and what I will say is, all the different concerts might not necessarily be doing it better, but they are just doing something different. And so I've yet to come across something where I was like, this is the most perfect musical experience I've ever had. But there might be something that's very attractive to me as a person. So I think this is where target audience becomes really important. Is the group of people that we are trying to serve, are we doing the right things for them?
I think one of the biggest challenges CMOs face now is being operating efficiently at scale, and being individually relevant.
Yes.
So in other words, you've got to be both.
It is tough to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
But again, I still believe that the power of brand and story is what really helps people stand apart to do those things.
Love it. Last little bit of advice for marketing professionals.
Oh. The last bit of advice is I'd say relationships become key.
Yeah.
Because even in this space of tech will not succeed unless the people in the different areas are working together for the same goal.
Yeah.
And that you've got to make sure to just take the plunge, try it. If it fails, it fails. But you've got to try it. You got to stay on trend. Don't wait for someone else to do it. I think a lot of times you hear, well, do we want to be first? Second sounds great. Let someone else try it and go through the kinks and figure it out. I think being the first person and just trying and not worrying about anybody else, seeing what works, I think that's the risk to take.
So people in marketing who embrace risk can, learn the tech,
Yes.
be good with humans. It's kind of a both and situation again, right? Do both.
Yes, do both. Do both. Take the risk. And especially, I know it's hard. I work in the financial industry as well. I know what that can look like. But when you build good relationships with your legal team and your MRU and those spaces, you can actually get to a good spot where they understand why maybe taking the risks, and maybe it's a smaller risk at first so that it gets uncomfortable for the larger one, but they can see what that's like and what that can do for their customers at the end, and it becomes a good space. But that's part of the relationship aspect of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I said last question, but actually an addendum.
It's okay.
One more question.
Yes.
Adobe Summit, you're here in Sydney.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, right. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
What are you going to be sharing with the audience? What's your main message?
I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Prudential journey and what it's been for us to go through in that space. And I think as we look at it, again, it comes down to the same thing. Tech, people, process, as you said, those become the biggest foundation. And if you are not preparing them properly and doing the right things to set it up before you launch, your stool is going to fall over, right? The three-legged stool is going to fall over. So we're going to talk a lot about how Prudential, as a 150-year-old company, continuing to try to surprise and delight people, has had to really lean on those three things and fight through the challenges to get us to a good spot.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, have a great experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This has been great.
One of the things in our interview that we spoke about, you would have heard Bridget speaking about all of these campaigns flowing down into individual experiences for customers. This idea of a customer experience that's being orchestrated by a combination of people, of tech, and other mechanisms they bring through the system, if you like, the traditional funnel, is allowing them to keep a really clear focus on what value will be created. The bottom line, of course, is well-being. If you are selling insurance and various other services that support well-being, it's really good to know that that bottom line remains the focus. The interesting thing for brand and marketing people is how well do you understand all the different threads across a large multinational organization? There are more than we could count. And so, of course, that's where the tech starts to become invaluable. And I quite like the AI they're using to create these individual experiences at scale. Really great example of a company like Prudential that is leaning into new opportunities and not just sort of sitting back and relying on their legacy and all of the power that can come with that. And really being aware that people have options, so you've got to stay engaged. So that's it for this episode of the CMO Show. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time. The CMO Show is produced by Impact Institute in partnership with Adobe. Impact Institute is a professional services firm for purpose-led organisations. Our unique blend of impact consulting, brand storytelling, and event services help our clients create meaningful change. This episode of the CMO Show was brought to you by your host, Mark Jones, that's me, and producers Kate Zadell and Kirsten Babels. Our audio engineers are Ed Chang and Daniel Marr. And a quick shout out to Adobe Experience Cloud, which gives digital businesses everything they need to design and deliver great customer experiences. Visit business.adobe.com to learn how Adobe can help transform your business.